In this video, we're going to draw the following construction. It's a single rosette, but it's contained in a slightly different way to how I've done in a previous video, because I want to get two tiles, so the hexagonal tile, this one, as a tracing, and also the square tile as a tracing. I like to show the relationship between these two arrangements so that the hexagonal tile will lead to potentially something like this. And the square tile will lead to something like this. And one thing I want you to be able to do is manage your expectations. So if you're a beginner and haven't drawn much, perhaps your first drawing won't turn out like this. Be patient, be kind to yourself, and try again. The layer of practice that often many geometers have isn't always something that's shared in their videos or photos and social media. So just know that for all the good drawings, potentially there's a whole bunch that led to it. So put in the practice and you'll get better with every single drawing. If you are interested in drawing something like this, so if we just have a look, every single line has been drawn. It's been drawn 4 times. This construction will not lead to this. That is a different arrangement. And rather than make it complicated and wonder how this leads to this, I'm going to show you this in a different video. Okay, so if you're interested in drawing one, tracing and transferring and doing watercolors by using tracing paper, then this is for you. If you prefer drawing things multiple times, then this isn't necessarily for you. It might be useful to see the relationship, but as a project, it might not be something you're interested in. All right, let's get started. So although I'm saying to you that you draw a radius of 7 centimeters max, I'm just going to draw a bit bigger so that you can see what I'm doing a bit more clearly. Okay, so we're going to start with, I'm just going to get an idea of where my middle is. I'm going to just start with a horizontal line, and then I'm going to mark its center. And then I'm going to put in my circle. We're going to then draw a semicircle on the left and on the right. Make it a little bit bigger than a semicircle if you wish. As long as it's wider than your original circle, then you are fine. And they should touch at the center. Now we need our vertical. So usually I work portrait orientation so that I've got space above and below, but I don't in this case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a second compass. If you don't have a second compass, just change your radius for this move up here and here, and then change it back for the next. So look at this distance. I'm not going to give you a number, you're going to judge this by eye. So look at this distance between my 2 fingers. Think of what half is, and your compass needs to be more than half. So just say about that much. And then put the compass on the left hand side and you'll draw an arc, and on the right hand side and you'll draw an arc. I mean right and left, I do know my right and left. And do the same at the top. And therefore you have enough information to construct your vertical. We're now going to use the radius that we use for the circle and for the semicircles. I'm going to use an awful lot. So these crosses, they've done their job. They're no longer important. Now concentrate on the circle and put your compass on the circle at the south position. And I'm going to hover to make sure it's fine. Ooh. Let me check. Okay, so draw a semicircle at the bottom. make sure it crosses in the corners, and do the same at the top. And then you're going to draw quarter circles from each of these corners. And there we have the information we need to divide this space into 24 divisions. So we're drawing a 12-fold rosette, therefore we need double that number of divisions. If you were drawing an 8-fold rosette, you'd need 16. If you were drawing a 10-fold, you'd need 20. Now often for the diagonal, in my case, for your 7cm radius, this won't be a problem. You sometimes need a longer ruler. If you don't, then I take the line to the center and then do it twice. Okay, now we're going to use the 4 corners of this inflated square, each of them through the center to the corresponding one on the other side. And the lines do not stop at these points. They go to the very edge of this square that we haven't drawn in just yet. And there we have the circle divided into 24. This enables us to pick out 2 tiles. So the first one is going to be the hexagon. And you're going to skip 3 points. So it's every 4th point that you're connecting for this hexagon. And this is a dashed line or dotted line. This hexagon is sitting on its point and it has 2 sides that are vertical. So maybe that's a good one to remember when you're trying to figure out which points you're going to connect. So that's our hexagonal tile. And I want to, the reason why I'm drawing this and overlaying them is I want you to see the relationship between how this tiling relates to the square tiling in one drawing. So using the vertical sides, you're going to extend into the corners on both sides. And then when you go across to do the horizontals, you'll notice that they hit at least 4 other points. So every time the radials from the center hit the side of the hexagon or the circle, that's going to line up with the edge of this square. So this square, one thing that's interesting is it shares some space with the hexagon, obviously there. You add to it, but then you remove a bit as well. And then the same at the top. You've got a lot of points to line up to get your accuracy correct. So do make sure you do that. Okay. So this quite powerful to me drawing allows you to draw 2 tilings and then draw 2 tracings and then 2 paintings, many more. Okay, so we need to re-establish our circle. So the circle that we drew gave us the 24 divisions, but we need a slightly smaller circle that touches the edge of both these tiles on the north, east, south and west. So do a lot of checking and hovering to make sure it does that before you commit to drawing it. And then once you're happy with it, you can draw it in. And what you'll notice is it hits the hexagon in 4 additional places. We need to identify 12 points, and it's basically the 12 o'clock position, skip one of the straight lines, the radials, and then another. And there's 12 points, like the 12 hours of a clock. Next thing we're going to do is put in some of the lines for the pattern already. It's as though you're drawing a dodecagon. So a dodecagon is a 12-sided shape where all the sides are going to hit these 12 points. But because we've got space outside of these 12 points, you need to extend your lines into those spaces to your dotted lines. Okay, so we'll start at the 12 o'clock. I'm going to use my ruler upside down because I'm using my inky pen. line them up, and then draw like so. So it's going to extend left and right. And for all of them, have that expectation that you line up the 2 points, but will probably draw beyond on both sides. Not always, as you can see here, it just stops. Even when you've done it, do give it a check. We're next going to draw in a really important line, the top point, so 12 o'clock on the circle. Imagine the 90 degrees and then add 1 division on the circle. This is really important. There's a lot of intersections around it. It has to be on the circle. And I'm going to join them with a dotted line. And the purpose of that dotted line is to hit 2 points. So I'm going to draw the line quite fully, but just know that actually we only care what it's doing in these 2 places. It's this point that we're after, so 1 division in from the top intersection, 1 division in from the bottom intersection. And this is the circle you're after. If any inaccuracies have crept up in your drawing right now, do not worry. Like, finish the process and just know that the next, the third, the fourth, the future drawings that follow it will be fine. Each drawing informs the next. Okay, so be kind to yourselves. 12 points, and these are in the spaces here, so they're like the half-hour points on a clock. And if you come to a point that you're not going to use, I usually put a cross beside it, and if it's quite crowded, just make sure you select the line, not the curves. And then this one we're going to use. Okay, so when you draw the first 4 lines, we're going to stop and start and leave space in the middle. So these lines, they always start on the dodecagon, and they go through the points that you've lined up, and it's as though you stop on the second intersection or second line afterwards. I'll show you another way of deciding where to stop. So it's hitting a straight line, stop at the second straight line. It's going through curves, but first straight line, second straight line. And that second straight line also lines up with the circled radial. And then move the ruler to the other side and do the same. Excusey. And then you're going to do the horizontal lines. Now these lines, I'm just going to give you their name. For 12 points, you're connecting lines that are 5 points away. So from 1 point, let's call that 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then from the same point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it will be 2 lines that will exit them, but we're going to draw them in pairs of parallel. And these 2 nicely meet up with the lines that you've already drawn. Now, this is a thing that I like to do in the old workshops, which is draw a proportioning circle in the middle that becomes like a no-go zone, and it just helps deal with where to stop and start in the middle. The parallel lines, the easiest ones are the horizontal and the vertical. All the others are kind of a jaunty angle, and sometimes it's difficult from my experience when I've taught this to see where to stop and start. So if you just draw in this line using those 4 corners, you'll know that you stop at this circle. It just leaves your center a little less messy. Stop at the circle, continue at the circle. And that circle should hit the 2 points that we've already mentioned. So can you see this line is where it stops? And if I carry on turning my ruler, can you see you've already done the horizontal? So then you're going to go to the next. Okay, so everything we need for our 2 tracings is now drawn. My tracing paper is extra huge. I'm just going to trim it down. And I'm going to attach with masking tape. Just make sure it's not too strong so that you end up ripping it. I'm just going to turn it this way so that, I don't know why. Okay, so we are going to take 2 tracings. The first one I'm going to do is the hexagonal tile, and I do this with a 2B pencil. So my 2B pencil, I've put some soft lead in my mechanical pencil, and it's a 0.9mm, so it's quite thick because of the size I'm working on. And we're going to outline everything in red, but we're going to leave the spaces between the petals. So initially we're going to just put in the crosses for the corners of our hexagon. Okay, let me just lift up so you can see what I've done. So can you see there's these 6 corners plus that extra line for no reason. So these 6 corners, I'm not going to draw anything from the pattern outside of them. And when I transfer the pattern, these will help me match up the tiles seamlessly. Okay, now I'm going to draw the edge of the dodecagon, the parts that enabled us to get the spaces around the rosette. These have a gap, so if you can see, each time you draw it, you're leaving a gap between where the petal finishes and the next petal starts. And be very conscious of stopping also at the edge of the hexagonal tile. Okay, let's just lift up. So what we're expecting to see is near each cross 2 extra lines. And can you see here I might have done something wrong because I've drawn too much. So I'm going to get rid of that bit and that bit. So now let's check again. So these spaces that often seem unimportant, they're really important. So when you tile them together, they will start making sense. So everything's fine. Now we're just going to draw on top of the red lines that are the parallel sides of the rosette, and the stopping and starting is already accounted for. Okay, so that's our hexagonal tile complete. If you don't want to detach it straight away, just check that you have everything. Maybe slip a piece of paper underneath, and then you can have a close check and tidy up anything you need to and fill in any gaps. But this is now ready for transferring. And now we're going to pick out the square tile. Okay, so as long as your square has got tracing paper on top of it, a little bit of a gap around the edges, we're now going to pick out the square corners, the squares corners with crosses, and then do the same in terms of picking out the dodecagon and then picking out the parallel sides. Okay, so the first step is always to get the corners done. Now, the sides of the dodecagon, we will leave the gaps in between the petals, but then also extend to the very edge of the square. So the square is a bit bigger than the hexagonal tile, so you need to go further into those spaces. Okay, and then just have a lift up and see. So what you should do is see a quarter of an octagon in the corners. And if you've got the octagon, then you've got these two arrow head shapes. Well, they're half arrows right now. And then you've got something which you can't quite tell, but they will become 5 pointed stars. And then you also have these dart shapes, which are like 3 pointed stars. Let's put in the parallel sides. Okay, I think everything's done, but usually I just suggest slipping in a piece of paper, and then the gaps, which no doubt I always leave, can be filled in. No overshoots. How amazing. A bit tiny one there. Okay, so both tiles are now complete. Now I'm not going to have a giant piece of paper for this, so if you did it the size that I suggested, which is 7 centimeters, these are the two you'll end up with, and these two will lead to potentially a few drawings.